But if IOFI then takes this additional thing of moral responsibility and is willing to become a watchdog, whereby it names and shames financial institutions, Islamic financial institutions, from not adopting principle-oriented Islamic finance, and then proposes directions, it can potentially bring about a change.
Ayaz Farooqi asks, are Islamic banks supposed to function like charitable organizations? And if so, then how do we expect them to survive in a competitive market?
Well, I think, Ayaz, your question basically has an implicit assumption, and your assumption is you've adopted the maxim of the interest-based model that the only way efficiency is justified by competition. And survival is not, the survival dynamic of competition is a direct result of riba and interest. Survival is best achieved through cooperation. Survival is best achieved by living within your means. Happiness is best achieved by relationships and contentment in the heart, and not by bank figures on your bank balance or more and more money accruing. And if Islamic finance can bring about these institutions, that would be a greater degree of survival for the collective humanity than otherwise.
Okay, Majid Siddiqui asks, who are or how do we know the top 5 scholars, and where can we get their contacts for communicating with them and creating a lobby group so that we can get these scholars involved and get the ball rolling and get some action out there?
Okay, I'm actually going to say, well, you can find them. I don't think IOFI lists their email, their contact details, but you can write to IOFI and ask them. And I'm actually going to put Samir on the spot here by saying Ethica can become a forum for coordinating these things, and Ethica can engage scholars, and not in a way of respect, and because they are basically our thought leadership. And up till now, there is a divorcing of them from the wider dynamics of public perception. So the public is not aware of their opinions or their discussions on these things. And if we need institutions like Ethica to engage them, to give them the platform to speak, and many of them want to speak, and many of them, if not all of them, I think are sincere, but they've not had that platform. So the 5 major scholars, it's not rocket science. If you go to any major presentations that list down the number of Sharia boards, you'll see who they are. I could list them by name, but I think this information is in the public domain. And so if you just type in Sharia Murat Unal, Sharia boards.
Can you please spell that?
I know it's one of these Turkish type spellings. Murat is N-U-R-A-T, and Unal is U-N-A-L. And if you type in something about Sharia boards, he's got a presentation on the number of scholars, and he lists all of them, the top 10 scholars, number of Sharia boards sit on, the networks that they're involved in. So you can find out who they are. I mean, I could give you the names here, but I just think it's something in the public domain.
Okay, Jan Jacobson says Greece, the country Greece was nearly pushed. Greece nearly pushed default by interest-based loans and credits, and was nearly taking down the whole eurozone with its debt. Now they were just cut and reduce the interest rate. Isn't it the best time to spread the advantages of Islamic finance in this time of eye-opening? Why aren't we able to deliver? There's a huge demand here.
I think this is a really good point by Jan, but the point, aside from the episode with Greece, the whole credit crisis and a lot of these things are staring people as the failures of the conventional debt-based financial system. The issue is at the level of our banks, there has been some rhetoric, but they're very much involved in the system by simulating transactions that have similar effects. And so what we need to do, I think, is for a discourse whereby we're engaging the sustainable financial community, because they are now coming out with a lot of information, and they're looking to Islamic finance or the Islamic community as a means of support. I mean, I literally contacted the New Economic Foundation recently, and they sent me emails back, and they sent me papers, and they're very keen to engage with the faith community. So this is where I think the common synergy can be taken advantage of.
Okay, another question from Abdullah Naeem. What do we have to do to come up with a unique Islamic finance product or products rather than just replicating conventional ones?
Well, this is exactly what we were speaking about. I think this whole uniqueness and innovativeness, this discourse is not relevant. This is another aspect of the Ribawi model, that this idea of constantly having a competitive edge, so you're innovative over your competitor. What we need is genuine institutions that produce genuine social, moral, ethical outcomes. And so this is the idea that when you cut off certain operational or institutional things, you give people the breathing space where they can actually articulate genuine solutions. And this is one such solution, the idea of a waqf model.
Muhammad Osama asks, how does one address the risk management issue in Islamic finance?
Yeah, well, that's going back to the point. The risk management issue in Islamic finance is basically ultimately always boils down to credit risk, because that's ultimately the Islamic banking model that it's adopted, the commercial banking model. So just to give you some examples, often I know people who work in Islamic finance, when they propose anything that doesn't fit the credit-based risk orientation model of an interest-based loan, those products are scrapped, because the idea is this is completely going against the sacredness of commercial banking.
We are being stormed by questions from Faiza, our most active attendee today. If we had an award which we could give for the most exciting questions, we would give it to Faiza. Let's have one more last question from Faiza. She says, if I'm not mistaken, awqafs are directly controlled by the ruling governments in the various GCC countries. How will getting involved in more social aspects for Muslim expats and locals work without the agreement of the government and the ruling entities?
Awqaf is just a name. Awqaf is a name of a certain structure, financial structure. What happened was when the Muslim world, much of the Muslim world was socialized or so on, or the awqafs were centralized under government, and the awqafs generally were taken to mean land endowments for religious institutions, and so on. But there is a different model of awqafs, cash waqf, which can be reintroduced. It's similar to the model of a trust by Islamic banks, and that doesn't mean by extension it needs to be governed by the government. It's just a different operational structure.
Amir says, universe is too big a place that a tiny creature like humans can affect the environment at a global level. Is not this global warming a hoax for political purposes? The pollution is caused by improper use rather than by finances used.
I think the idea is we don't go to either extreme. We don't say everyone is utopic. We don't live in a utopic idea that everyone will basically become saints, and nor do we say that everyone is inclined to corruption. What we say is we want a social dynamic or institution at the level of finance that encourages people to take on the idea of responsible ownership, the idea of living within their means. And this is exactly what Islam does. Islam is intended to bring about people who are representatives or the stewards of earth at the level of the body, at the level of the mind, and at the level of the soul. And if we want to genuinely impact these injunctions, then this is how Islamic finance will operate. And so, once again, when you say the universe is too big a place and we can't, this is the pessimistic, I'm not saying you are, but this is often the pessimistic viewpoint. Our motivation for change is not premised on whether it's feasible, the universe, because we understand that all success and all la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah, all movement and strength lies with Allah. And so from this point, the idea is arih nafsaka min at-tadbir, yani save this planning with regards to results. Your job is to engage with the means, because that's what you and me will be held accountable for. Okay. So as the Quran says, "I'malu fasayara Allahu amalakum." Do the good, and Allah will see the good, irrelevant of the results.
Rayan Mufti wants to know the name of the book that you quoted during your talk, the Mirage Currency. Or what
I don't remember quoting the Mirage Currency. I haven't really read that book.
You mentioned something about a concept of which was
structural violence.
No, some mirage, some sort of.
Oh, the growth illusion. Yeah, Richard Douthwaite. So I think you should look at it's in the presentation, it's in the slides. By Richard Douthwaite, Growth Illusion. He has a book online, Short Circuit. You can find that online. And also, I encourage all of you to read Charles Eisenstein, Ascent of Humanity, his sections on capital, the role of capital.
Okay, we only have time for one last question, and that's from Janeika Ali, and she says, "How do you go about changing the views of AOFI? Isn't it a long shot?"
The reason why I advocated AOFI is because they have significant, I think, power in the industry. As to whether we succeed or not, that's in Allah's hands. Long shot or short shot, the idea is to try. And encouraged by I think there is a general emphasis, and I believe in the goodness in people's hearts, and I believe that people, if they're convinced by something, the majority of people will want to change.
Thank you very much, Yusuf. We would like to thank you for your time and for your most detailed presentation. It was one of the most informative presentations that we have conducted so far on Ethica. Uh, we encourage people to please keep up the conversation, and a link to the recording and uh, a link to our blog entry where we'll be posting the presentation and the following discussion which entails from this presentation will be sent shortly to all of you. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for coming on a weekend and giving us your most valuable time. We've also received hundreds of requests for forthcoming webinars on Ethica Institute. And all of you have given us some great feedback into what as to what you would like to, what topics you would like Ethica to cover in the future webinars, and we are very thankful for you for giving us that feedback. And inshallah, we will try our best to make our webinars, our forthcoming webinars, more informative and ones which really bring about some change in the industry, in our lives, and in society in general. Thank you very much once again. Assalamu alaikum.